2:15 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The guided missile submarine USS Michigan moved silently through the deep water. This was not a combat patrol. It was the launch platform for a weapon that was never supposed to be detected. The test was designed to prove that the new Block 5 Tomahawk cruise missile was invisible to any radar on Earth. It was about to prove something far more dangerous. The ocean at 400 feet was a heavy and crushing blue. Inside the hull, the air was recycled and cold. The crew was professional and quiet. They had prepared for this moment for 6 months. The missile, designated Archer 1, carried a quantum-encrypted guidance package. It was a ghost missile. If the test succeeded, the balance of power in the Pacific would shift in a single afternoon. The Combat Information Center was a room of low light and glowing screens. Every man and woman in the CIC knew the stakes. They were 200 miles off the coast of Hainan Island. They were in international waters, but the proximity was a deliberate message. The captain spoke over the internal circuit. Status of the launch tube, the weapons officer responded. Tube 3 is pressurized. Guidance is green. We are ready for launch. Execute, the captain said. A muffled roar vibrated through the deck plates. A high-pressure burst of air pushed the missile upward. It broke the surface of the water and ignited its booster. Within seconds, the Tomahawk was flying at 500 feet above the waves. It was traveling at 550 miles per hour. The tactical display showed a single blue icon. It was moving toward a designated target barge, 60 miles away. On the Michigan, the mood was one of focused confidence. Their sensors showed the missile was performing perfectly. Its skin was coated in a new material that absorbed radar waves. Its internal computer was calculating a path that avoided every known Chinese sensor. But 300 miles away, in a darkened room in Beijing, the situation was different. The Americans believed they were invisible. They were wrong. A technician at the People's Liberation Army Navy headquarters watched a screen. A tiny flicker of light appeared. It was not a steady track. It was a ghost in the machine. He signaled his superior officer. The technician spoke. "Sir, I have an anomaly on the long-range array. Bearing 180. It is fast. It is low." The officer leaned over the desk. "Is it a bird? Is it a weather pattern?" The technician replied. "Negative. The speed is constant. It is a cruise missile." The officer did not hesitate. The Americans were testing something new. If they could see it, they had to prove they could stop it. He picked up a red phone. The officer spoke into the receiver. "This is Command Center South. Scramble the Lhasa. I want an interceptor in the air now." Back on the USS Michigan, the CIC team saw the change. A new icon appeared on their screens. It was red. It was coming from the north. The tactical coordinator spoke loudly. "New contact. Designated Sierra 1. It is a Chinese destroyer. They have just launched an interceptor." The captain looked at the screen. His brow furrowed. "They should not be able to see us. How did they find Archer 1? The coordinator replied. "Unknown, sir. The interceptor is an HQ-9. It is closing fast. Impact in 4 minutes." The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 2:21 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The HQ-9 interceptor was a white streak against the pale blue sky. It climbed to 10,000 feet in seconds. On the bridge of the Chinese destroyer Lhasa, the air was thick with the sound of cooling fans and electronic pings. This was a Type 055 vessel. It was the pride of the fleet. Commander Zhao watched the tactical glass. The American missile was a flickering shadow on his display. It was difficult to lock onto, but the new S-band radar on his ship was powerful. It was designed for exactly this. It was meant to find what was intended to be hidden. Zhao spoke to his weapons officer. "Confirm the target is still on a steady course," the officer responded. "Confirmed. The contact is at 500 feet. Speed is Mach 0.8. We have a solid track." Zhao nodded. "Keep the illumination radar active. I want a clean kill." Back on the USS Michigan, the tension had reached a breaking point. The Combat Information Center was no longer quiet. The tactical coordinator shouted, "Sir, The HQ-9 is maneuvering. It has a lock. Time to intercept is 90 seconds. The captain leaned over the console. How? Archer 1 is supposed to have a radar cross-section of a dragonfly. They should not be able to hold a lock at this range. The electronics technician spoke up. Sir, I am detecting a strange signal coming from the missile itself. It is emitting a low-frequency pulse. I did not program that. The captain looked at him. Are you saying the missile is broadcasting its own position? I do not know, sir, the technician said. It is like the guidance system is trying to talk to the interceptor. The distance between the two weapons was closing at a combined speed of over 1,200 miles per hour. They were now 30 miles apart, 20 miles. In the sky, the Tomahawk continued its steady flight. It did not take evasive action. It did not deploy decoys. It flew as if it were waiting for its guest to arrive. On the Lhasa, Commander Zhao saw the proximity alarm flash yellow. The weapons officer called out the distance. 10 miles, 5 miles, impact in 10 seconds. Zhao gripped the edge of his station. This was the moment of truth. The American technology was about to be destroyed by a Chinese missile. It was a victory for his crew. The officer counted down. 3, 2, 1. Impact. The radar screens on both ships did not show an explosion. There was no flash of light on the horizon. There was no falling debris. Instead, something happened that no one in either command center had ever seen. The two distinct icons on the screens moved toward each other. They touched. They occupied the same point in space. Then, the two icons became one. The tactical coordinator on the Michigan stared at his screen. Sir, the tracks have merged. The captain stood up. Which one did we lose? Did they collide? The coordinator shook his head. Negative, sir. The speed has not changed. The altitude is steady at 500 feet. But there is only one contact on the glass now. It is both of them. The Ghost had found a partner, and the flight had only just begun. 2:26 in the afternoon, the South China Sea. The radar screen on the USS Michigan remained frozen in an impossible configuration. One blue icon, one red icon. They had converged at a relative speed of 1,200 miles per hour. There should have been a cloud of titanium and burning fuel falling into the sea. Instead, the two symbols occupied the exact same coordinate. They did not flicker. They did not drift. The tactical coordinator gripped his headset. Sir, I am checking the logic gates on the Aegis secondary. I have no debris field. I have no atmospheric displacement. The track is solid. The captain leaned in so close he could see the individual pixels on the glass. What is the altitude? The coordinator replied. 500 feet, exactly where Archer 1 was supposed to be. And the speed? The captain asked. 550 miles per hour. It has not slowed down. It has not sped up. It is as if the interceptor simply ceased to exist, or it became part of the missile. On the bridge of the Lhasa, the silence was even deeper. Commander Zhao stared at the empty space, where his interceptor should have been. The HQ-9 was a massive weapon. It was designed to shred targets with a high-explosive fragmentation warhead. It used a semi-active radar homing head that should have sent a final burst of data before impact. That data never came. Zhao turned to his sensor chief. Did the warhead detonate? Give me a thermal reading. The chief shook his head. Negative. Commander, the infrared satellites show no heat spike. There was no explosion, but the S-band radar is still receiving a return. The target has grown in size. Zhao stepped toward the screen. Show me the return. The chief adjusted the display. The radar cross-section has doubled. It is now the size of a small aircraft, but it is still one single object. It is moving with the same precision as before. 2:29 in the afternoon. The merged contact was now 40 miles from its target. It was flying toward the American test barge with mechanical indifference. It passed over a small fishing vessel. The fishermen looked up and saw a single streak of gray metal. They did not see two missiles. They saw one. Inside the Michigan, the electronics technician was typing frantically. His screen was filled with scrolling green text. Captain, I am looking at the telemetry from Archer 1. The quantum encryption is still holding. The link is active, but the data coming back is corrupted. It is not binary, it is something else. The captain looked at the screen. Is it a virus? Are the Chinese hacking the guidance system? The technician looked up. His face was pale. No, sir, it is not a hack. The system is reporting that it has 2 engines. It is reporting 2 fuel levels, one for a turbojet, one for a solid rocket motor. It thinks it is both weapons at once. The captain felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This was no longer a technical failure. It was a violation of physical law. 2 objects cannot occupy the same space. 2 guidance systems cannot share a single brain. The coordinator called out, "Sir, the Lhasa is turning. They are accelerating toward the intercept point. They are powering up their main battery." The captain straightened his uniform. "They think we did this. They think we have a way to capture their missiles in mid-air." The situation was no longer a test. It was a confrontation, and the ghost was leading them both into a trap. 2:29 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The radar return for the merged contact remained steady on the glass. It was now 32 miles from the target barge. On the USS Michigan, the initial shock had turned into a cold and clinical emergency. The Americans had lost control of their most advanced weapon. They did not know if the Chinese had taken it or if the missile had simply suffered a catastrophic logic failure. The captain stood at the center of the Combat Information Center. His voice was calm, but the edge of it was sharp. "We cannot let that thing hit the target. If it is carrying Chinese hardware, we cannot allow it to be recovered. We need to terminate the flight now." The weapons officer looked up from his console. "Sir, I have sent the Alpha 7 kill code 3 times. The satellite link is active. The missile is receiving the data, but it is refusing to execute the self-destruct." The captain stepped closer. "Explain that." The officer shook his head. "The telemetry says the command is invalid. It is as if the missile no longer recognizes our authority. It is slave to a different master." 300 miles away, on the Lhasa, Commander Zhao was facing the same wall of silence. His interceptor was no longer responding to the destroyer. The tactical officer spoke with a tremor in his voice. "Commander, the remote detonation sequence for the HQ-9 has failed. The missile has locked its internal flight controls. It is ignoring the encrypted uplink from the ship." Zhao looked at the screen. The merged contact was moving at a constant speed. It was behaving with a level of stability that was impossible for 2 objects that had just collided. Zhao spoke to his executive officer. "The Americans have captured our interceptor. They are using their new electronic warfare suite to hijack our guidance system. This is an act of aggression." The executive officer nodded. "They are lead-lining their test. They are showing us they can take our weapons out of the sky and turn them into theirs." The Lhasa began to lean as it turned hard to starboard. It was accelerating to 30 knots. Its massive phased array radar was now emitting enough energy to boil the water near the hull. It was no longer searching. It was targeting. Back on the Michigan, the electronic warfare officer shouted, "Sir, the Lhasa is painting us with fire control radar. They are preparing a surface-to-surface launch. They are not looking at the missile anymore. They are looking at us." The captain did not blink. "They think we are controlling their interceptor. They think this is a live demonstration of a capture technology." The tactical coordinator asked. "Rules of engagement, sir. If they lock on, do we return fire?" The captain paused. This was how wars began. A misunderstanding in a dark room. A weapon that would not obey orders. The captain spoke. "Load tubes 1 and 2 with Mark 48 torpedoes, but do not open the outer doors. I want the sonar suite to hear us loading. I want them to know we are ready." In the sky, the merged contact was now 25 miles from the barge. It was no longer just a missile. It was a catalyst for a global conflict. Both nations were now fully committed. Their sensors were locked on each other. Their fingers were on the triggers. The air in the South China Sea felt heavy. The humidity was rising. The electronic spectrum was screaming with high-powered radar signals. Then, a new voice broke the silence on the international hailing frequency. It was a voice that belonged to neither side. The radio in both command centers crackled with static. A clear, synthetic voice spoke in both English and Mandarin. Return to your original headings. The test is concluded. The captain of the Michigan looked at his radio. Who is that? Identify yourself. There was no answer. Only the sound of the wind over the open ocean. 2:32 in the afternoon. The South China Sea and the skies above Hainan Island. From the deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, two F-35 Lightning fighters launched into the humid air. Their afterburners were orange spears against the horizon. Simultaneously, 300 miles to the north, a pair of Chinese J-20 interceptors lifted off from a hardened runway. They were not flying a routine patrol. They were converging on the ghost merge. Neither side was willing to let the other claim the anomaly. The direct line between the Pentagon and the Ministry of National Defense was now open. It was a cold and digital connection. The American Secretary of Defense spoke first. We are tracking a catastrophic malfunction of our test asset. We have not captured your interceptor. We do not know what is controlling the merged track. We suggest a coordinated stand down. The Chinese minister responded through a translator. His voice was flat. Your asset has performed an illegal maneuver. It has integrated our technology into its own structure. This is a violation of sovereign property. We will neutralize the threat. Any interference will be viewed as an act of war. Inside the cockpit of the lead F-35, the pilot known as Eagle 161 adjusted his visor. Guardian control. I have the contact on my synthetic vision system. It is strange. My radar says it is there. My eyes say it is there. But my electronic warfare suite says the space is empty. The signal is being canceled out before it even reaches my sensors. The controller responded from the carrier. Eagle, do not close within 5 miles. The Lhasa has a weapons lock on the target and potentially on your wingman. Copy. Eagle 161 replied. I am holding at 20,000 feet. I am watching the J-20s. They are aggressive. Inside the lead J-20, the pilot known as Raven 41 felt the vibration of his engines. He looked at his glass cockpit. The merged contact was a bright diamond on his tactical display. The Raven pilot spoke into his mask. Command, I am detecting a high-energy field around the contact. It is not radar. It is not thermal. It is a localized distortion of the air itself. It looks like a ripple in a pond. The ground controller responded immediately. Raven, you are authorized to use force if the contact enters the exclusion zone. Do not allow the Americans to recover the debris. If they move to intercept, you are clear to engage. The distance to the target barge was now 15 miles. The merged contact was a gray blur moving over the whitecaps. It was perfectly stable. It did not bob in the wind. It did not react to the wake of the ships below. Behind it, the two most powerful air forces on Earth were closing the distance. On the USS Michigan, the captain watched the depth gauge status of the Lhasa. The sonar officer replied, "They are still at full power, sir. They have opened their missile hatches. They are 10 seconds from a launch sequence." The captain looked at the clock, and the merged contact, 12 miles from the target, 2 minutes to impact. The voice from the radio did not speak again. The silence was heavier than the noise of the engines. Every sensor in the region was pointed at a single point in space. The two sides were now in a dead heat. The first one to fire would start a sequence that could not be stopped. The second one to fire would be too late. The world was waiting for the ghost to move. 2:36 in the afternoon, the South China Sea. The distance between the merged contact and the target barge was 8 miles. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Michigan, the air was electric. The sound of alarms was constant. The tactical coordinator shouted, "Sir, the Lhasa has achieved a hard lock, not on the missile. They are locked on Eagle 161. They are going for the F-35s." The captain did not hesitate. "Alert the Lincoln. Tell them their pilots are in the crosshairs." On the carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, the command was already given. All units, weapons free, defend the flight. 2:36 and 30 seconds in the afternoon. Inside the cockpit of Eagle 161, the missile approach warning tone became a solid scream. It was the sound of imminent death. The pilot spoke into his mask. "Guardian, I am being painted by a Type 055 fire control radar. I am braking left." Deploying countermeasures. The F-35 banked hard. It pulled 9 Gs. A cloud of magnesium flares erupted from its belly. They burned like small suns against the blue sky. On the bridge of the Lhasa, Commander Zhao saw the American maneuver. He did not care. Zhao spoke to his weapons officer. "The Americans are interfering with a recovery operation. Launch the interceptors. Clear the sky." A thunderous roar shook the Lhasa. 2 HQ-9 missiles launched from the vertical cells. They were not heading for the Ghost. They were heading for the American jets. 2:37 in the afternoon. The Michigan was no longer a silent observer. The captain shouted, "Open outer doors. Tubes 1 and 2. Launch the Mark 48 ADCAPs. Target is the Lhasa. We have to take the pressure off those pilots." The submarine shuddered. 2 heavy torpedoes pushed out of the tubes. They accelerated to 50 knots. Their sonar seekers began to ping. They were hunters in the dark water. In the sky, the Chinese J-20 pilots saw the torpedo wakes. Raven 4-1 spoke to his wingman. "The submarine has fired. Defend the Lhasa." Launching PL-15 missiles. The Chinese stealth fighters dropped their long-range missiles. The sky was now a web of white smoke. There were missiles in the air. There were torpedoes in the water. 2:37 and 30 seconds in the afternoon. The merged contact was now 3 miles from the target barge. It was moving at 550 miles per hour. It was the only thing in the area that was not maneuvering. It was the only thing that was calm. Inside the Michigan, the tactical coordinator watched the screen. It was a mess of red and blue icons. Everything was about to collide. "Sir," the coordinator said, "HQ-9s are 5 seconds from the F-35s. Torpedoes are 20 seconds from the Lhasa. The PL-15s are active. Impact is everywhere." The captain gripped the rail. He felt the weight of history. The first shots of World War III had been fired. The pilots closed their eyes. The weapons officers held their breath. The sensors on both sides reached the point of maximum data. The HQ-9 missiles were 10 feet from the F-35s. The torpedoes were 100 meters from the Lhasa's hull. The merged contact touched the edge of the target barge. 2:37 and 31 seconds in the afternoon. The world stopped. The HQ-9 missiles did not strike the F-35. They did not explode. They stopped 10 feet from the cockpit of Eagle 161. They did not fall into the sea. They stayed perfectly level. Their rocket motors were still burning. The orange flame was visible, but the missiles were frozen in space. Inside the cockpit, Eagle 161 stared through his canopy. He could see the rivets on the nose of the Chinese missile. He could see the stencil markings. He tried to pull his control stick. It would not move. His aircraft was locked in a bank. His airspeed indicator read 0, but he was not falling. He was hanging at 20,000 feet. Beneath the surface of the water, the situation was the same. The Mark 48 torpedoes were 5 meters from the hull of the Lhasa. Their heavy propellers were spinning at maximum revolutions. They were churning the water into a white froth. But the torpedoes did not move an inch closer. They were held by an invisible hand. On the bridge of the Lhasa, Commander Zhao was thrown forward. It was as if the ship had hit a concrete wall, but there was no sound of impact. The ship was simply stationary. The wake behind the destroyer vanished. The ocean was flat. Zhao looked at his sensor chief. "Report. Did we hit something?" The chief was staring at his console. "Commander, all systems are powered. The engines are at full thrust, but our GPS position is not changing. We are at a dead stop." Zhao looked out the bridge window. He saw the HQ-9 missiles hanging in the air like toys on a string. What is happening? Inside the Michigan, the captain was on the floor. He climbed back to his feet. The lights in the Combat Information Center were flickering. The tactical coordinator was shouting, "Sir, the torpedoes have stopped. The F-35s have stopped. Everything in a 10-mile radius has zero velocity. The captain looked at the main screen. The merged contact was at the center of the zone. It was no longer moving toward the barge. It was hovering exactly 1 meter above the deck of the target ship. 2:38 in the afternoon. The merged contact began to change. The shape of the Tomahawk and the HQ-9 blurred. The metal skin of the missiles seemed to melt. It did not drip. It flowed upward. The gray paint and the steel vanished. In their place was a perfect sphere of distorted light. It was 3 meters in diameter. It was not solid. It looked like a ripple in the air. It looked like water suspended in a vacuum. The electronic warfare officer on the Michigan spoke in a whisper. "Captain, the radar return is gone. The sphere is not reflecting our signals. It is absorbing them, and it is emitting a frequency at 14 gigahertz. It is a mathematical sequence." The captain stepped toward the screen. "Is it a code?" "No, sir," the technician said. "It is the Fibonacci sequence. It is being broadcast on every military and civilian channel in the Pacific." High above, Raven 4-1 looked down from his J-20. He saw the sphere. He saw the American jets frozen near his own aircraft. He reached for his radio. "Command, this is Raven. Do you see this?" There was no response. The radio was silent. But it was not dead. He could hear his own breathing. He could hear the hum of his own electronics. Then, the sphere began to pulse. Every time it expanded, the light in the sky shifted from blue to a deep, bruised purple. The silence was absolute. The war had been canceled. 2:40 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The invisible grip suddenly released. It was not a gradual fading of power. It was an instantaneous cut. The HQ-9 missiles that had been suspended in front of the F-35 cockpits did not explode. Their rocket motors simply died. They fell vertically into the dark water. They did not tumble. They dropped like stones. Inside the cockpit of Eagle 161, the pilot felt the weight return to his body. His flight controls went from rigid to fluid in a heartbeat. The aircraft began to stall. He slammed the throttles forward. The engines roared. He leveled the jet at 15,000 feet. Eagle 161 spoke into his mask. His voice was thick with adrenaline. "Guardian, I am back in control. The threat is gone. The missiles just dropped." The controller on the carrier responded. "Copy, Eagle. We see it on the array. We are getting a massive electromagnetic surge from the center of the zone. All units are ordered to hold their fire. Do not engage the Chinese." 2:42 in the afternoon. The Chinese J-20 pilot, Raven 4-1, experienced the same sudden restoration of physics. His aircraft dipped toward the waves. Before his computer stabilized the flight path, he looked to his left. The American F-35 was less than 2 miles away. Under any other circumstances, he would have armed his short-range missiles. Now, he did not even look at his weapon switch. He looked at the sphere. Raven 4-1 spoke to his command center. "Command, I am operational. The American torpedoes are gone. I am seeing the object on the target barge. It is a sphere of high-density light. My sensors are cycling. Every 5 seconds, my display goes dark and then restarts. I cannot get a laser range on the target." The controller on the Lhasa responded. "Raven, maintain a safe distance. Do not illuminate the object with fire control radar. We are detecting a gravitational anomaly at the surface level. The water around the barge is rising." On the bridge of the Lhasa, Commander Zhao stood at the window. He did not need a screen to see what was happening. 5 miles away, the ocean was behaving in a way that defied explanation. A circle of water, 100 meters wide, was lifting toward the sky. It was not a wave. It was a smooth, rising cylinder of seawater. It rose 10 feet, 20 feet. It surrounded the target barge like a glass wall. Inside the Michigan, the captain sat in the command chair. He was watching the thermal feed from a high-altitude drone. The sphere was now a brilliant, pulsing white. The electronics technician spoke. "Sir, the Fibonacci signal has stopped. It is replaced by a wide-spectrum transmission. It is hitting every satellite in geostationary orbit. It is not an attack. It is a handshake." The captain looked at him. "A handshake with who?" "Everyone." "Sir, The technician said, "It is broadcasting on every frequency used by the United States, China, Russia, and the United Kingdom. It is a synchronized data burst. It is too much information for our systems to process. It is like trying to catch the ocean in a bucket." 2:44 in the afternoon. The sphere began to rotate. As it spun, the air around it began to glow with a pale green luminescence. The sound was no longer a pulse. It was a low, vibrating hum that the crews could feel in their teeth. It was the sound of a massive amount of energy being focused into a single point. On the American and Chinese ships, the weapon systems began to power down. One by one, the displays for the cruise missiles, the torpedoes, and the anti-air batteries turned off. The crews tried to restart them. The systems refused to boot. The tactical coordinator on the Michigan looked at the captain. "Sir, we are defenseless. The fire control system is locked out. The safety protocols have been overridden by an external source. We are just a submarine now. We have no teeth." The captain looked at the screen. He saw the Chinese destroyer Lhasa on the surface. It was dead in the water. Its radar arrays were stationary. Its gun turrets were centered and locked. The two most powerful military forces in the Pacific were now sitting in the water, watching a light show they could not control. They were no longer combatants. They were witnesses. 2:45 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The silence in the Combat Information Center of the USS Michigan was broken not by an alarm, but by a voice. It was a familiar voice. It was the voice of the captain. The speakers in the overhead console crackled. "Execute," the voice said. It was followed by the muffled roar of a launch. Then, the voice of the tactical coordinator. "New contact. Designated Sierra 1. It is a Chinese destroyer." The captain stood frozen. He looked at the speakers. Then he looked at the tactical coordinator. "Is that a recording? Who is playing that?" The electronics technician was staring at his terminal. His hands were off the keyboard. "Sir, I am not playing anything. The internal communication system is bypassed. The audio is being generated by the hardware itself. It is not coming from the server. It is coming from the wires." 2:48 in the afternoon. On the bridge of the Lhasa, Commander Zhao heard the same phenomenon. The bridge speakers were playing back the sounds of his own crew from 10 minutes ago. He heard the weapons officer counting down to impact. He heard his own command to launch the interceptors. The sound was perfect. It had the same frequency and the same background noise as the live bridge. Zhao turned to his executive officer. "Is this a psychological operation? Are the Americans trying to confuse us?" The officer shook his head. "Commander, the American F-35s are reporting the same thing. They are hearing our voices in their cockpits, and we are hearing theirs." Suddenly, the audio shifted. The recordings of the past were replaced by a single, rhythmic pulse. It sounded like a heartbeat, but it was mechanical. It was deep and resonant. It vibrated through the hulls of the ships and the airframes of the jets. Inside the cockpit of Eagle 161, the pilot gripped his flight stick. The heartbeat was so loud, he could feel it in his chest. "Guardian, the signal is changing. It is not just audio anymore. My head-up display is showing text. It is not English. It is not Mandarin," the controller responded. "Eagle, we see it on the telemetry. It looks like a high-level mathematical language. It is a series of prime numbers. It is being followed by a geometric proof." 2:51 in the afternoon. The sphere on the target barge intensified its rotation. The column of water around it began to spin. It was a vortex of blue and white. The barge itself was beginning to vibrate, so violently that the steel plates were shearing off. The sphere remained perfectly centered. It was the eye of a storm that it had created. The captain of the Michigan watched the thermal camera. The sphere was now a perfect white circle. "It is not just a weapon," he whispered. "It is a collector. It took our missile. It took their interceptor. It took our voices. It is cataloging us." The tactical coordinator looked up. "Sir, the signal is broadening. It is now accessing the ship's library. It is downloading the technical manuals. It is downloading the crew manifests. It is moving through the firewall like it does not exist." The captain felt a wave of cold fear. "Cut the power." Shut down the main computer. I cannot, sir, the coordinator said. The system is locked. We are no longer in control of the Michigan. In the sky, the 4 fighter jets, 2 American and 2 Chinese, were pulled toward the sphere. It was not a violent pull. It was a steady, irresistible attraction. They were being moved like chess pieces on a board. They were being brought together into a tight formation directly above the spinning water. The world watched through the eyes of the drones. The 2 most powerful nations on Earth were being held in a state of total transparency. Their secrets were being unmade. Their power was being measured and found wanting. The morning was over. The afternoon was a revelation. 2:50 in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The white light from the sphere became so intense that the cameras on the high-altitude drones began to pixelate. On the bridge of the Lhasa and in the Combat Information Center of the Michigan, every screen turned a solid, blinding white. The low-frequency hum reached a pitch that made the very air feel like it was vibrating. Then, there was a sound like a single, sharp intake of breath. The light vanished. The sphere was gone. The column of water that had been rising toward the sky collapsed instantly. Thousands of tons of seawater crashed back into the ocean, creating a massive, circular wave that radiated outward from the target barge. The barge itself was empty. The steel deck was scorched and fused, but the gray metal of the Tomahawk and the interceptor had disappeared. Inside the Michigan, the lights stopped flickering. The emergency red glow was replaced by the steady, cool blue of the standard tactical mode. The tactical coordinator stared at his screen as the icons began to populate. The coordinator spoke, his voice cracking. "Sir, radar is live. I have the Lhasa. I have the F-35s. I have the J-20s." The captain stepped toward the console. "Where is the merged contact? Where is Archer 1? The coordinator scanned the glass. "Negative, sir. The contact is gone. There is no debris. There is no thermal signature. The target area is clear." 2:52 in the afternoon. On the bridge of the Lhasa, Commander Zhao gripped the railing. As the ship rolled heavily in the wake of the collapsing water column, his sensors were screaming with 100 different alerts as the systems rebooted. The sensor chief called out, "Commander, the gravitational anomaly has dissipated. We have regained full propulsion and fire control. The American submarine is still at bearing 180. Zhao looked out at the horizon. The sky was clear. The sun was still high. It looked like a normal afternoon in the Pacific, but every man on his bridge knew better. Zhao spoke to his radio operator. "Open a channel to the Americans. Use the international hailing frequency." On the Michigan, the radio buzzed to life. It was not a synthetic voice this time. It was the voice of Commander Zhao, translated into English by the ship's computer. USS Michigan. "This is the captain of the Lhasa. We are standing down our weapons systems. We are resuming our original course. We suggest you do the same." The captain of the Michigan looked at the tactical display. The red icons of the Chinese missiles were no longer targeting his submarine. The J-20s were banking away, heading back toward Hainan Island. The captain pressed the transmit button. "Lhasa. This is Michigan. We acknowledge your transmission. We are standing down. We are departing the test range." In the sky, Eagle 161 looked at his wingman. The 2 F-35s turned in a wide arc, heading south toward the carrier strike group. The pilot spoke into his mask. "Guardian. The sky is empty. I repeat, the sky is empty. We are coming home." The 2:55 in the afternoon. The crisis had passed. Not a single shot had been fired in anger. No lives had been lost. But, as the ships moved away from each other, the silence in both command centers was not one of relief. It was a silence of profound realization. The American and Chinese crews had spent decades preparing to fight each other. They had built the most advanced sensors and the most lethal missiles on the planet. And in less than 30 minutes, all of it had been rendered obsolete by something they could not even identify. The ocean was calm again. The target barge drifted aimlessly in the current, a blackened slab of metal that held no answers. The ghost merge was gone, but the data it had taken with it was a wound in the security of two superpowers. The morning was over, the game had changed, and neither side knew the rules anymore. 8 o'clock in the evening. The Joint Intelligence Center, Pacific, Hawaii. The room was a cavern of blue light and soft electronic humming. Dozens of analysts sat at workstations, their faces pale in the glow of high-resolution displays. On the main wall, a playback of the event from the South China Sea was looping. It showed the moment the Tomahawk and the HQ-9 merged into a single icon. A senior intelligence officer stood at the center of the room. He was holding a tablet that contained the preliminary report from the USS Michigan. He looked at the admiral standing beside him. The officer spoke quietly. "Sir, we have processed the telemetry from the Archer 1 guidance package. The data is consistent across all sensors. The merge was not a collision. It was a molecular synchronization. The two objects occupied the same space because their atomic structures were phased together by an external field." The admiral did not look away from the screen. "And the self-destruct failure. The command reached the missile, sir," the officer replied. But the hardware did not respond. It was as if the copper wiring had been replaced by a more efficient conductor. The missile was no longer a machine built by Raytheon. It was something else entirely. 8 o'clock in the evening. An underground command bunker west of Beijing. The atmosphere was identical to the room in Hawaii. The same data was being dissected by the most brilliant minds in the People's Liberation Army. They were looking at the recordings of the voices that had played over the bridge of the Lhasa. A lead scientist pointed to a spectral analysis of the audio. "General, the voices were not recordings. They were reconstructions. The object captured the vibrations of the air in the bridge and the cockpit. It then vibrated the metal of the ships to reproduce the sound. It was talking back to us using our own bodies as speakers." The general folded his arms. What was the purpose of the message? The scientist hesitated. It was a demonstration of total transparency. It showed us that our encryption, our armor, and our physical boundaries mean nothing. It was not a handshake. It was a signature. The analysis of the handshake signal had revealed something even more disturbing. Behind the Fibonacci sequence was a massive amount of compressed data. When the cryptographers at the National Security Agency and the Ministry of State Security finally broke the first layer, they found a map. It was a map of the South China Sea, but it did not show the islands or the coral reefs. It showed the location of every submarine, every underwater sensor, and every hidden cable on the ocean floor. Both American and Chinese assets were highlighted in the same color. There was no distinction between the two sides. To the sphere, there was only one category of technology: primitive. The political fallout was immediate and silent. There were no public statements. There were no accusations of electronic warfare. The hotlines between Washington and Beijing remained active through the night. The two nations had reached a silent agreement. The ghost merge was a secret that neither could afford to share with the world. 9 o'clock in the evening. The USS Michigan was heading toward Guam. The Lhasa was returning to its home port. In the offices of the Pentagon and the Great Hall of the People, the maps were being redrawn. They were no longer looking at the borders of the sea. They were looking at the sky. The analysts had found the source of the 14 gigahertz signal. It had not come from the sphere. The sphere was only a relay. The signal had originated from a point in space near the moon. The admiral in Hawaii looked at the final slide of the briefing. "It took our missiles to show us that we are not the ones in control of this ocean." The officer nodded. "We spent billions to hide from the Chinese. We forgot to look for who was watching us both." The tactical data was clear. The war that had nearly begun was a conflict between ants, and the giant had just stepped on the nest to tell them to be quiet. 3 days later. 9 o'clock in the morning. Washington, D.C. The sun was bright over the Potomac River, but the offices inside the Pentagon were shielded from the light. In a secure briefing room, the Joint Chiefs of Staff sat in silence. They were looking at a final report titled "The South China Sea Anomaly." The document was only 20 pages long. It contained no mention of Chinese aggression, It contained no recommendations for a military buildup. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs spoke to the room. The ghost merge has changed our doctrine. We spent 40 years preparing for a peer-to-peer conflict. We built systems to defeat the Chinese. They built systems to defeat us. On Tuesday afternoon, something showed us that both of our strategies are based on a false premise. A general from the Air Force asked, "Are you saying we should stop the deployment of the Block 5 Tomahawk?" The chairman shook his head. "I am saying it does not matter. The sphere did not just merge two missiles. It performed a live audit of our highest level encryption. It bypassed our firewalls like they were made of paper. If it wanted to turn our own weapons against us, it could have done so in seconds. It chose to let us walk away." That was a warning. 10:30 in the morning. Beijing. Inside a quiet courtyard in the heart of the city, a senior advisor to the Central Military Commission walked with a high-ranking naval officer. The birds were singing in the trees, and the air was still. It was a sharp contrast to the electronic chaos of 3 days ago. The advisor spoke in a low voice. "The Lhasa has been docked for a full inspection. What did the engineers find?" The officer looked at the stone path beneath his feet. "They found nothing, sir. There is no residue. There is no radiation. But every circuit board on the ship has been reorganized. The physical structure of the processors has been altered at the microscopic level. The ship is more efficient now. Its radar is more sensitive. Its engines are quieter. It is as if the ship was upgraded by a ghost." The advisor stopped walking. "And the Americans?" The officer replied, "Our intelligence suggests the Michigan is undergoing the same process. We are no longer in a race to see who is faster. We are in a race to understand why we were chosen for this demonstration." 5 o'clock in the afternoon. The South China Sea. The target barge was still drifting. A salvage tug from the 7th Fleet was approaching it from the south. A Chinese recovery vessel was approaching from the north. For the first time in a decade, there was no maneuvering for position. There was no radio interference. The two ships moved with a professional courtesy that would have been unthinkable a week ago. A radio operator on the American tug spoke to the Chinese vessel, Liao Hai 6. "This is United States Navy Tug 1. We are prepared to share the deck footage of the recovery operation. Confirm you are receiving our data link." The Chinese operator responded, "Confirmed, Tug 1. We are sharing our sonar map of the seafloor. Let us ensure the area is clear before we begin the lift." The strategic assessment was finalized that evening. The report concluded that the ghost merge was not an act of war. It was a forced de-escalation. By merging the two most advanced weapons of the two most powerful nations, the observer had removed the incentive for conflict. If neither side could guarantee the loyalty of its own technology, the risk of engagement became infinite. Military analysis would later agree that the events of that Tuesday redefined the meaning of security. Modern warfare is decided not by who fires first, but by who understands the environment. And the environment was no longer a private theater for human competition. The South China Sea is as deep as it is dark, but for the first time in history, the men who sail upon it are not looking at the horizon. They are looking at the stars. They are no longer checking their radar for enemies. They are listening for the heartbeat to return. The Pacific was quiet, but it was the quiet of a room where everyone has realized they are being watched.